Papua New Guinea, officially the independent state of Papua New Guinea, is an Oceanian country that occupies the eastern half of the island of New Guinea and its offshore islands in Melanesia, a region of the southwestern Pacific Ocean north of Australia. Its capital, located along its southeastern coast, is Port Moresby. The western half of New Guinea forms the Indonesian provinces of Papua and West Papua. Papua New Guinea is one of the most culturally diverse countries in the world. 848 languages are listed for the country, of which 12 have no known living speakers. Most of the population of over 7 million people live in customary communities, which are as diverse as the languages. It is also one of the most rural, as only 18% of its people live in urban centers. The country is one of the world's least explored, culturally and geographically, and many undiscovered species of plants and animals are thought to exist in the interior. Strong growth in Papua New Guinea's mining and resource sector led to the country becoming the sixth fastest growing economy in the world in 2011. Although growth is expected to slow once major resource projects come online in 2015. Mining remains a major economic factor, however, with talks of resuming mining operations in the previously closed-off Panguna mine ongoing with the local and national governments. Nearly 40% of the population lives a self-sustainable natural lifestyle with no access to global capital. At the local level, the majority of the population still live in strong customary societies while social life is overlaid with traditional religious cosmologies and modern practices, including conventional primary education. Customary subsistence-based agriculture remains fundamental. These societies and clans are explicitly acknowledged within the nation's constitutional framework. The Papua New Guinea Constitution expresses the wish for traditional villages and communities to remain as viable units of Papua New Guinean society, and for active steps to be taken in the continuing importance to local and national community life. At the national level, after being ruled by three external powers since 1884, Papua New Guinea established its sovereignty in 1975 following almost 60 years of Australian administration. It became a separate Commonwealth realm with Queen Elizabeth II as its head of state and became a member of the Commonwealth of Nations in its own right. History. Archaeological evidence indicates that humans first arrived in Papua New Guinea around 42,000 to 45,000 years ago. Agriculture was independently developed in the New Guinea highlands around 7,000 BC, making it one of the few areas in the world where people independently domesticated plants. A major migration of Austronesian-speaking peoples to coastal regions of New Guinea took place around 500 BC. This has been correlated with the introduction of pottery, pigs, and certain fishing techniques. More recently, in the 18th century, the sweet potato was brought to New Guinea, having been introduced to the Moluccas by Portuguese traders, who obtained it from South America. The far higher crop yields from sweet potato gardens radically transformed traditional agriculture. Sweet potato largely supplanted the previous staple, taro, and gave rise to a significant increase in population in the highlands. Although headhunting and cannibalism have been practically eradicated, in the past they were practiced in many parts of the country as part of rituals related to warfare and taking in enemy spirits or powers. For example, in 1901, on Goari Bari Island in the Gulf of Papua, a missionary, Harry Dauncey, found 10,000 skulls in the island's longhouses. According to the writer Mariana Torgovnik, the most fully documented instances of cannibalism as a social institution come from New Guinea, where head-hunting and ritual cannibalism survive in certain isolated areas into the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and still leave traces within certain social groups. Little was known in Europe about the island until the 19th century. Although Portuguese and Spanish explorers, such as Dom Jorge de Menezes and Inigo Ortiz de Retes, had encountered it as early as the 16th century, Traders from Southeast Asia had visited New Guinea beginning 5,000 years ago to collect bird of paradise plumes. The country's dual name results from its complex administrative history before independence. The word Papua is derived from an old local term of uncertain origin. New Guinea was the name coined by the Spanish explorer Inigo Ortiz de Retes. In 1545, he noted the resemblance of the people to those he had earlier seen along the Guinea coast of Africa. Guinea, in its turn, is etymologically derived from Portuguese word Guinea acute. In the 19th century, Germany ruled the northern half of the country as a colony for some decades, beginning in 1884, as German New Guinea. The southern half was colonized in the same year by the United Kingdom as British New Guinea. With the Papua Act 1905, it transferred this territory to the newly formed Commonwealth of Australia, which took on its administration. Additionally, from 1905, British New Guinea was renamed the Territory of Papua. Early in World War I, German New Guinea was captured by Australian forces in a small military campaign, and after the war was given to Australia to administer as a League of Nations mandate. Papua, by contrast, was deemed to be an external territory of the Australian Commonwealth, though as a matter of law it remained a British possession. This was significant for the country's post-independence legal system. The difference in legal status meant that until 1949 Papua New Guinea had entirely separate administrations, both controlled by Australia. During World War II, the New Guinea campaign was one of the major military campaigns. Approximately 216,000 Japanese, Australian, and U.S. servicemen died. After World War II, the two territories were combined into the Territory of Papua New Guinea, which later was simply referred to as Papua New Guinea. The natives of Papua appealed to the United Nations for oversight and independence. The nation established independence from Australia on 16 September 1975, and maintains close ties. Papua New Guinea was admitted to membership in the United Nations on 10 October 1975. A secessionist revolt in 1975-76 on Bougainville Island resulted in an 11th-hour modification of the draft constitution of Papua New Guinea to allow for Bougainville and the other 18 districts to have quasi-federal status as provinces. A renewed uprising started in 1988 and claimed 20,000 lives until it was resolved in 1997. Following the revolt, the autonomous Bougainville elected Joseph Kabui as president in 2005 and he served until 2008. He was succeeded by his deputy John Tabineman, who continued to be re-elected as leader until the election of December 2008, which James Tanis won. As part of the current peace settlement, a referendum on independence is planned to be held sometime before mid-2020. Anti-Chinese rioting involving tens of thousands of people broke out in May 2009. The initial spark was a fight between Chinese and Papua New Guinean workers at a nickel factory under construction by a Chinese company. Native resentment against Chinese ownership of numerous small businesses and their commercial success led to the rioting. The Chinese have traditionally been merchants in Papua New Guinea. Politics. Papua New Guinea is a Commonwealth realm. As such, Queen Elizabeth II acts as its sovereign and head of state. It was expected by the Constitutional Convention, which prepared the draft constitution, and by Australia, the outgoing metropolitan power, that Papua New Guinea would choose not to retain its link with the monarchy. The founders, however, considered that imperial honours had a cachet that the newly independent state would not be able to confer with a purely indigenous honours system, so the monarchy was retained. The Queen is represented by the Governor-General of Papua New Guinea, currently Sir Michael Ogyeo. Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands are unusual among Commonwealth realms in that Governors-General are elected by the legislature rather than appointed by the executive branch. Actual executive power lies with the Prime Minister, who heads the cabinet of 31 MPs from the ruling coalition, which make up the government. The current Prime Minister is Peter O'Neill. The unicameral National Parliament has 111 seats, of which 22 are occupied by the governors of the 21 provinces and the National Capital District. Candidates for members of Parliament are voted upon when the Prime Minister asks the Governor-General to call a national election, a maximum of 5 years after the previous national election. In the early years of independence, the instability of the party system led to frequent votes of no confidence in Parliament with resulting changes of the government of the day, but with referral to the electorate, through national elections only occurring every 5 years. In recent years, successive governments have passed legislation preventing such votes sooner than 18 months after a national election and within 12 months of the next election. And in December 2012 the first 2 readings were passed to prevent votes of no confidence occurring within the first 30 months. This restriction on votes of no confidence has arguably resulted in greater stability, although perhaps at a cost of reducing the accountability of the executive branch of government. Elections in PNG attract large numbers of candidates. After independence in 1975, members were elected by the first-past-the-post system, with winners frequently gaining less than 15% of the vote. Electoral reforms in 2001 introduced the limited preferential vote system, a version of the alternative vote. The 2007 general election was the first to be conducted using LPV. In foreign policy, Papua New Guinea is a member of the Commonwealth of Nations, Pacific Islands Forum and the Melanesian Spearhead Group of countries, and was accorded observer status within ASEAN in 1976. Followed later by special observer status in 1981. It is also a member of APEC and an ACP country, associated with the European Union. Since August 2011, there was a political crisis between the Parliament-elect Prime Minister, Peter O'Neill, and Sir Michael Somare, who was deemed by the Supreme Court to retain office. The standoff between Parliament and the Supreme Court continued until the July 2012 national elections, with legislation passed effectively removing the Chief Justice and subjecting the Supreme Court members to greater control by the legislature, as well as a series of other laws passed, for example limiting the age for a Prime Minister. The confrontation reached a peak, with the Deputy Prime Minister entering the Supreme Court during a hearing, escorted by some police, ostensibly to arrest the Chief Justice. There was strong pressure amongst some MPs to defer the national elections for a further 6 months 1 year, although their powers to do that were highly questionable. The Parliament-elect Prime Minister, and other cooler-headed MPs carried the votes for the writs for the new election to be issued, slightly late, but for the election itself to occur on time, thereby avoiding a continuation of the constitutional crisis. The crisis was tense at times, but largely restricted to the political and legal fraternity, plus some police factions, but the public and public service standing back. It was a period when, with increased telecommunication access and use of social media, the public and students played some part in helping maintain restraint and demanding the leadership to adhere to constitutional processes and not to defer the elections and the people's say in who should be their legitimate representatives for the next 5 years. Under an amendment of 2002, the leader of the party winning the largest number of seats in the election is invited by the Governor-General to form the government, if he can muster the necessary majority in Parliament. The process of forming such a coalition in PNG, where there is little ideologically binding parties together, involves considerable horse trading right up until the last moment. Peter O'Neill emerged as Papua New Guinea's Prime Minister after the July 2012 election, and formed a government with the former Governor of East New Britain Province, Leon Dion, as Deputy Prime Minister. Law: the unicameral parliament enacts legislation in the same manner as in other jurisdictions that have cabinet-responsible government, or parliamentary democracy. It is introduced by the executive government to the legislature, debated and, if passed, becomes law when it receives royal assent by the Governor-General. Most legislation is actually regulation implemented by the bureaucracy under enabling legislation previously passed by Parliament. All ordinary statutes enacted by Parliament must be consistent with the Constitution. The courts have jurisdiction to rule on the constitutionality of statutes, both in disputes before them and on a reference where there is no dispute but only an abstract question of law. Unusual among developing countries, the judicial branch of government in Papua New Guinea has remained remarkably independent, and successive executive governments have continued to respect its authority. The underlying law consists of principles and rules of common law and equity in England common law as it stood on 16 September 1975, and thereafter the decisions of PNG's own courts. The courts are directed by the Constitution and, latterly, the Underlying Law Act, to take note of the custom of traditional communities, with a view to determining which customs are common to the whole country and may be declared also to be part of the underlying law. In practice, this has proved extremely difficult and has been largely neglected. Statutes are largely adapted from overseas jurisdictions, primarily Australia and England. Advocacy in the courts follows the adversarial pattern of other common law countries. This national court system used in towns and cities is supported by a village court system in the more remote areas. The law underpinning the village courts is customary law. Human rights. Papua New Guinea is often labeled as potentially the worst place in the world for gender violence. A 2013 study in The Lancet found that 41% of men on Bougainville Island, Papua New Guinea, reported having raped a non-partner, while 14.1% reported having committed gang rape. According to UNICEF, nearly half of reported rape victims are under 15 years of age and 13% are under 7 years of age, while a report by Child Fund Australia citing former parliamentarian Dame Carol Kiddu claimed 50% of those seeking medical help after rape are under 16. 25% are under 12 and 10% are under 8. Administrative divisions. Papua New Guinea is divided into 4 regions. The nation has 22 province-level divisions. 20 provinces, the autonomous region of Bougainville, and the National Capital District. Each province is divided into one or more districts, which in turn are divided into one or more local-level government areas. Provinces are the primary administrative divisions of the country. Provincial governments are branches of the national government. Papua New Guinea is not a federation of provinces. The province-level divisions are as follows. In 2009, Parliament approved the creation of 2 additional provinces. Hela Province, consisting of part of the existing Southern Highlands Province, and Jiwaka Province, formed by dividing Western Highlands Province. Jiwaka and Hela officially became separate provinces on 17 May 2012.